You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the associate editor and columnist for the Financial Times, Stephen Bush, and the Spectator's economics editor, Kate Andrews. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Metro suggests that questions over Rishi Sunak's premiership and his reported ties to the controversial Tory donor, Frank Hester, aren't going away. While the Daily Mail reports on another potential issue for the Prime Minister amid rumours of former leadership candidate Penny Mordaunt's renewed bid for the top job. The Times carries a defiant message from Rishi Sunak, who says this is the year Britain will bounce back and he's not going to roll over when it comes to the general election. The Guardian has an exclusive about the NHS allegedly covering up poor care, leading to fears of avoidable deaths. The Mirror blames years of Tory cuts to dental services behind patients resorting to pulling out their own teeth with pliers. The Financial Times has a report on what the US Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, might do next with American interest rates. The Sun says the Princess of Wales has been spotted out and about at a farm. While the Star hears there's a big storm on the way, which could result in a fortnight of flooding. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Stephen Bush and Kate Andrews. Welcome to you both. Let's start with our top story and what we've been covering all evening, the Russian elections. President Putin claiming victory, I think about 88% of the vote. Very defiant, extended speech he made this evening. Kate.
Well, he'll continue his illegal war now that he's staged an illegal election. There were reports ahead of the election that the Kremlin was hoping to get above 80% turnout and above 80% support for Vladimir Putin. It looks like it's come closer to 90. We can't believe any of these figures, not least because a lot of people who will have voted for Putin will have done so out of fear, and also because people who wouldn't have voted for him, many of those votes wouldn't have been counted. You know, it's actually quite depressing because we already knew what was going to come out of this election before we went into it. That was a guarantee, and we have seen some protests. The queues that formed at midday were supposed to be a sign of protest, of Russians knowing that this election is not legitimate. But still, when you watch it, when you watch Putin accepting another 6 years, you know, it's quite grim. I think it upsets you more than you realise it's going to, even though you already knew the result.
But we have seen some dissent, though, haven't we, Stephen?
Yeah, so, we've seen, as Kate says, these people queuing at noon to deliberately signal that while they were voting in this election, they knew they were voting in a sham. We've seen people spoiling their ballots, some writing in the name of Navalny, some writing in the name of other candidates, because although he did face some token opposition, all of the opponents he worried about had been, for some reason or another, they found a pretext to bar them for that. So we've seen some signs of defiance, but of course it underlines that, you know, Putin remains very much in control of his country for now, and underlines that he will hope to do so for a long time.
We learnt some interesting things this evening. He spoke the name of Navalny for the very first time, reportedly. He's not one to mention the names of his enemies, but he mentioned his name this evening and did say that he had agreed to a prisoner swap before he died. And that's the first time we've had that confirmed.
Well, it's convenient that you can say these things when there's only going to be one account. And it was quite crass the way he was talking about Navalny, as if it was, you know, a shame that he passed away under such mysterious circumstances, but that this kind of thing does happen in prison and in prisons around the world, as if this wasn't a very obvious case of foul play. So no, we are continuing to get information from Putin. All of it indicates that things remain the same and that his ambitions remain the same in his so-called acceptance speech. Again, it's quite strange to use that language. He was talking about how one of his main initiatives remains what he calls his operations in Ukraine, what we know is an illegal war. And that will continue to be his focus. And as Stephen says, at the moment, he is in a position to keep going.
The Financial Times, their headline suggesting that he has now tightened his grip on Russia, Stephen.
Well, yes, partly one of the reasons why we're saying that is precisely this internal squashing of opposition, then it now looks, his position now looks much more secure than it was at the start of the war, when, of course, he faced that very serious coup attempt. One of his opponents, as Kate says, has died in mysterious circumstances. One of his opponents has been shot down after failing to launch a coup. So, yeah, he looks stronger than ever.
What are your predictions for the future? I mean, we've had Gillian Joseph today in Berlin casting her vote and writing her husband's surname on the ballot paper. Is she potentially the future of any credible opposition?
The difficulty for opposition in Russia is that if you rise up to any kind of level that you're going to get real attention, you're going to get real traction, you are going to be suppressed. And the way that the Kremlin does that is through the most evil of tactics. You need people, you need the organic grassroots to come out and support you in opposition. And the amount of fear that is stoked in Russia, the things that they do to those protesters, can really be quite unspeakable. I think the difficulty remains that any kind of real protest, any kind of real opposition would eventually have to be in Russia, not just outside of it. And at the moment, that is very much stacked in Putin's favour.
And Stephen, what did you think of the queues that we saw in capital cities outside of Russia and people actively wanting to either spoil their ballot or show some protest in some form? Is that encouraging that still there is some, maybe small voice, but some voice of protest and dissent?
Well, it's inspiring, partly because look, almost everyone who joins those queues will have relatives back in Russia who may face reprisals as a result. And it's inspiring, and it shows that people have an enduring desire to choose how they're governed. I think it's very difficult for us to talk usefully about what might happen, because we're essentially back in Russia in a situation that they were in terms of the level of repression they faced, as they were in the era of Stalin. And it really took until 1991, when the Soviet Union fell and various archives were declassified, for us to really get a grip on how serious some of the threats to Stalin's leadership ultimately were. I think probably the place we're at now is that we outside of Russia won't really understand the depth and scale of the threats to Putin's leadership until one or another of them is successful.
Yeah, no, interesting point. Let's turn to domestic politics. Kate, let's have a look at Rishi Sunak's fortunes, faces new round of leadership speculation. It seems to have been going on for quite a while, actually.
Yes, over the weekend, the name going around has been Penny Mordaunt, who, of course, previously ran in the leadership election as somebody who could potentially replace Rishi Sunak. Penny Mordaunt has pushed back on this over the weekend. Not too long ago, it was Trade Secretary Kemi Badenoch that people were talking about. She also pushed back. I think the pushback's happening for two reasons. Number one, I think regardless of your future leadership ambitions, you understand that more turmoil within the Tory party right now, especially from potentially swing voters having to watch the Tory party have yet another crisis, is not a great look. I think the other harsh reality for Rishi Sunak is that if you do have serious leadership ambitions, you do not want to be Prime Minister going into the next election. You do not want to oversee what the polls are telling you is going to happen right now. If you are thinking about your medium to longer term, Penny Mordaunt might be, Kemi Badenoch might be. And if you are, you certainly don't want to be in the top job just yet.
Stephen, I mean, do you think that there really is any semblance of a leadership contest, that they would countenance that before the general election?
Conservative MPs are not in a happy place. Many MPs were very distressed at how poorly Downing Street handled last week's allegations of racism. Mel Stride, who's very popular in the parliamentary party, was sent out to defend a ridiculous line, and then it was undone basically after he was on air. That upset a lot of people. So look, it's possible that there might be a kind of market panic, as it were, among Conservative MPs, right? Then some event causes a leadership election to happen by mistake. Given that there's going to be some very brutal local elections in a month's time, you can see one way that panic might start. I don't think there will be a deliberate and organised leadership plan, but it only needs 15% of MPs to panic and send in their letters for us to end up in a sort of leadership election by mistake.
I'm intrigued that you think there can be a leadership election by mistake.
Well, because, this thing is, it only takes sort of one person to go, well, I'm going to write in, or one person to, when Rishi Sunak quit the government of Boris Johnson, he did not believe that he was going to trigger the exit of essentially the whole of the cabinet. I think it was 3 education secretaries in 2 days we had. He quit because he was having a standoff about the budget with the Prime Minister. And I think Rishi Sunak's leadership is actually in a very similar position to where Boris Johnson's was. Tory MPs knew Boris Johnson was not leading them in a positive direction. They looked at the alternatives and went, not sure there's an upgrade here. And then something happened, and there was a leadership election. They look at Rishi Sunak, they go, not sure he's leading us well. They look at the alternatives, they go, oh, not sure about that. But it only needs someone to quit or someone to have assault for another reason for this to spiral into a serious threat to his leadership.
Interesting. Kate, just very quickly, the Mail front page, Sunak allies rage at Penny. Why are they angry at her? We were reading last night that she had nothing to do with this plotting around her name.
Well, I think whenever you have accusations of somebody, whenever somebody's name appears in these kinds of stories, people, especially those who support the person in charge, are always going to ask, you know, is that name, is that person's ambition really pushing their limits right now? So I think it's quite natural that allies of the Prime Minister are going to end up pushing back. But as I said, the idea that if you are really serious about this job, that you want to have it right now, probably not.
I think you're probably right, Kate and Stephen, for the minute. Thank you. Coming up, the Princess of Wales has been seen in public for the first time since the photo controversy. We'll tell you what we know and what we don't when we come back. Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Stephen Bush and Kate Andrews. Let's have a look at The Sun, shall we? And massive headline. Kate outdoors. Princess of Wales seen out with William at a farm. Who would like to kick off here?
I think I just should point out for anyone watching at home that this big photo, which you can't see the text there, is actually taken from the autumn. The Sun story very optimistically says that this will end web rumours. I don't think that a picture from autumn and then a story that some people have seen her but there are no new photos is going to dispel people's, I actually think, perfectly reasonable questions that visibly the palace kind of keeps going, oh, you know, don't worry, it's fine, we're going to release a slightly odd doctored photo, we're going to, you know, without wanting to cast aspersions on the quality of the royal journalist beat, you know, this stories of this kind. I just think all of this stuff is just going to further fuel questions about what is going on with the palace right now.
I completely agree. Unless we get photos of her and William at this farm shop, I suspect this is going to make the rumours worse, because The Sun is reporting that there are multiple witnesses saying that they saw the princess out at her favourite farm shop, saying Kate was out shopping with William and she looked happy and well. The idea that multiple people saw her, nobody snapped a photo, nobody managed to grab a photo. Again, the front cover here on The Sun, that is not Kate Middleton from now, it's a photo from last autumn, is not going to help the situation. And you have to wonder what the palace PR is doing. I mean, this is some of the best PR in the entire world. There are presidents, big celebrities that are desperate for the kind of PR that they can usually bring to the table. And this has just been mess up after mess up. And if they want to stick to the line that you're just not going to see her until after Easter, then you stick to that line. But then reports that she's out and about walking around in public, still with no photos, are very strange.
Do you think they felt pressured to put anything out because of the conspiracy theories that are swirling around social media and elsewhere?
The thing is that most of those conspiracy theories, right, they come from the fact that the palace has not been straight with people, right? They've sort of created their own demand around these theories, right? In the reason why people are, and most of those theories are pretty far-fetched, but the reason why we're seeing these far-fetched theories, I don't think it's so much that the palace feels driven into speaking because of the theories. I think because of the weird way that the palace is communicating with all of us, people are going, well, what's the real story here? It's driving a lot of conspiracy theories. And I think the thing we've actually seen pretty consistently about Kensington Palace since the Prince of Wales took over, as it were, is that actually they aren't very good at communicating with the public. You know, they had that visit which didn't go very well. They're doing whatever's going on with here. I think clearly there's a problem there.
The PR machine that can handle Megxit can surely handle the princess getting surgery, and it has just, as Stephen says, spun out into these wild, wild rumours, most of which are pretty crazy, ultimately stemming from the fact that something doesn't feel quite right about this, in a story with multiple witnesses and no photos. But, you know, let's see, maybe in the next 12 hours, some photos do emerge. That would be a fascinating development.
We're going to move to another rumour, I'm afraid, in the Metro. And this rumour, I think, has been going around for years. Idris Elba for Bond. Stephen?
Well, you know, hopefully after he plays Bond, he can play me in the movie of my life. But no, I mean, I think... but seriously, I mean, I think obviously he's a terrific actor. He's got great presence. He does feel, as you say, then he's been rumoured to have this role since Craig did it. I sort of think, to be honest, that the Bond franchise needs to work out what it wants to do with itself. It kind of seems to be still going through a bit of a kind of existential crisis.
A self-loathing period.
Yeah, it's,
really.
I think they've never really recovered since Roger Moore stopped doing it, personally. But I think, I think he'd be great casting for it.
Oh,
Kate, you're for Idris, aren't you?
He'd be wonderful. We were debating before we were on air if you know, he's of an age where it would be totally plausible for him to be jumping between buildings and off planes and all the rest of it. I'd take him any day. I think he'd be great.
There you have it. Idris for Bond. We shall see what happens another year later.